97X, the Quad Cities Classic Rock Authority. This weekend, we've got Muddy Fest coming into town. Centennial Park in downtown Davenport. A ton of great bands and special guests, including our very own Billy Baldwin in studio right now. How are you, sir?
Thanks for having me.
So one of the special guests is Mark Boone Jr. He's, of course, known from Sons of Anarchy. So the motorcycle element is very paired up with him. What's your relationship with riding?
I've had, several bikes throughout the years. I haven't been riding the last couple of years, but Boonie's an old friend of mine. So actually a fairly new friend of mine. Kim Coates from Sons of Anarchy is an old dear friend of mine. He's a very dear pal of mine. And we got Boonie here. But my connection to this event, to the state of Iowa, is through the great sport of wrestling. I'm going to be at the event spending some time with legendary coach Dan Gable, who's an old friend of mine who I met for the first time just after he won the 1972 Olympics.
Oh, okay.
I met him where I grew up in New York. He came in to do a camp and clinics for this other legendary coach, not Dan Gable level, but this another very iconic figure who was like a second father to me, who introduced me to the sport at a very early age. And when he won the gold medal in Munich in '72, we had him come in maybe that following summer, '73. I would have been about 10 years old.
Okay.
And I met him back then. And I'm very actively involved and intimately involved with the sport of wrestling on the NCAA level and with the Olympic team as well. And I've known Gable for years. I've traversed this state and wrestled in. I've either watched wrestling or wrestled in a dozen different cities in Iowa.
How did you get started in wrestling? Why did that sport speak to you?
Well, I just said it shouldn't have, because I was built like a basketball player or a baseball player, but I was involved at a very early age because this guy Al Bevilacqua, Coach Bevilacqua, was high school coach and then Hofstra University coach, and he was the junior world coach and the world team coach, and he introduced me to the sport when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and the rest is history. By the time I was in 7th or 8th grade, I was running with a group of about 8 or 10 guys, and we were doing it. We were like a family, and we were doing it all the time. I wasn't, very good. I wasn't bad. We had a decent team. I was a decent wrestler. I won more than I lost, but it's a sport that I love. I love the sport, and I love the people. Very cool. I've always said people from, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's a real heartland sport.
And with NFL has kind of risen to the top of the crop as far as sports in America go. But there's been a lot of come down on the NFL and football in general with all the concussions and whatnot. Do you think that's a way for wrestling to kind of slide in and jump up a notch and kind of take part, because you've got a lot of the same as far as football and wrestling go? You have some of the same characteristics as far as the training go and the team sport, and do you see any correlation between the two?
Well, concussions is one of the correlations.
Okay.
That's an issue for wrestling as well. But there's a big problem. Youth football has dropped off in big states like Florida and Texas and California. Where those kids are going to go, I'm not quite sure. I think lacrosse is a big sport where a lot of the kids are gravitating towards right now. That's probably the #1 growth sport in the country right now on the club level and the high school level. But wrestling enjoys a level of success and popularity on the high school level that's unprecedented. It's super popular now. It's really popular in California now, where I live, when it wasn't when I was wrestling in high school and college in the 70s and 80s. But I also think, what's the gentleman's name that runs the UFC? The bald-headed guy, Dana. Yeah, Dana. If USA Wrestling and the sport of and Olympic wrestling are smart in their partnership with MMA and UFC and Dana White, we could really partner with one another. Wrestling needs Dana White more than he needs us, but I was on the committee to preserve Olympic wrestling, which lobbied with Gable, which lobbied the IOC in St. Petersburg, Russia, and Buenos Aires, Argentina, and we were successfully reinstated as a sport. Dana was very good to us when we were helping to launch the campaign to have wrestling reinstated as an Olympic sport. And I think we should continue with our partnership with the United States Armed Services and with Dana White to help grow the sport. I think those are two strategic partners.
So you and Dan Gable are going to do a question and answer. Will you be a tag team in this thing?
So I'm interviewing Gable.
Oh, okay.
And then we're going to open up to a Q&A. It'll hopefully be most questions for Gable regarding his life and his wrestling career, but I'm certainly open to conversations about my life and my wrestling career,
which is
my Hollywood career.
Yeah, which is pretty interesting in its own right. Obviously, your brothers and you have shared a lot of success in Hollywood. What do you think? What do you think it was that? Because it's very rare for all that big a family to gain that much success. Did your parents push for it a lot? Was there a magic potion?
Not at all. My father, we couldn't afford it. We couldn't afford instruments. We couldn't afford lessons. We couldn't afford any kind of like artistic and creative. My father just like took a ball, threw it out in the yard, and just prayed we didn't wind up in the emergency room. I had 4 concussions and a fractured skull before I was 8, just from roughhousing with my brothers and stuff. And we used to. Last time I had a fight with one of my brothers, we knocked my mother's teeth out. So that'll tell you what my house was like.
Who's the best athlete out of the
Daniel? My brother Daniel. Yeah. He was. If he had worked really hard, he could have taken it to. He could have taken it up another notch or two. He could have been a real college athlete. I wrestled in college for a few years, Division III. We had a very good team, but I wasn't any kind of star or significant contributor at all. My brother Daniel, when I was in 9th grade, I wrestled 98, and he wrestled heavyweight. He weighed 235, and I weighed like 110, and I cut down to 98. Now you know where I got the 4 concussions from.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
my parents were not in the business. My mother was a college graduate and early on a school teacher that went on to raise 6 children. My father was a high school history teacher and football coach that raised 6 kids on a teacher's salary. I don't even think he made $20,000 a year with 6 kids. And I always call it the 4 A's. Academics was first, athletics, arts, and activism all a very, very close second. But when I say arts, I mean my father took us into Broadway to see theater and stuff like that. I never had formal acting instruction when I was a child, and I never played the violin, or I was in like my school band in elementary school for 1 year, and I had drumsticks and the thing called a practice pad.
Yeah.
I had a practice pad. I don't think my drumsticks ever touched like an actual drum set.
Right. Some paradiddles and such.
So.
Well, Billy Baldwin, you're going to be at the Muddy Fest this weekend. Are you going on a ride tomorrow? Are you doing a motorcycle ride?
They're working on that for me. They're working on getting me a bike. Yeah, I was supposed to also do a ride on Saturday, but I have to bolt out of here because my niece is being married on Saturday afternoon in Syracuse, and I was planning on going there, flying there, doing the ride Saturday, and flying there Saturday afternoon for the wedding on Sunday.
Gotcha.
There's only one problem. The wedding's not on Sunday. The wedding's on Saturday.
That's a problem.
I had to change the plans over the last couple of days. I for some reason, I got it in my head that she was married on Father's Day this Sunday.
Well, it's going to be a great time this weekend. Centennial Park. Check out themuddyfest.com to get all the information, schedule of events, and all the great music. Robbie Krieger's going to be down there tomorrow, along with the Zealots, Rude Punch, and, of course, Sublime with Rome. Billy Baldwin, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Muddy Fest this weekend with 97X.